He kissed me in my garage while the rain poured and my wedding ring still sat on my hand. I didn't stop him. I should have. But in that moment, when the storm outside matched the one inside me, I felt seen, alive, wanted. What started as a broken banister became a crack in everything I thought was solid. And you won't believe what happened after that. This is not just a story of infidelity. It's a story of rediscovery, regret, and the line we all say we won't cross until the moment we do. Welcome to Vows and Betrayals, a channel where real voices reveal raw, true stories of love loss and the moments that change everything. Before we dive in, hit like, subscribe for more stories that stay with you, and share this if you've ever stood at the edge of a choice you never thought you'd face. Because from that one kiss, everything changed. I used to think loneliness was loud, like crying in the middle of the night or begging someone to stay. But real loneliness, it's quiet. It looks like folding laundry in silence, watering the garden with no one to admire it, watching old sitcoms alone while the dinner gets cold. That was my life. My name is Maggie Lane. I'm 48. I teach part-time at an elementary school here in Asheville, North Carolina, a town with charm history and enough rain to keep the roses blooming. My husband, Russell, works for a bank. He travels often, the kind of man who never forgets to send a Mother's Day card, but sometimes forgets to ask how my day went. He's not a bad man, just busy, distant, like someone I used to know. Our kids are grown. The house is quiet again, too quiet sometimes. I spend my mornings in the garden, pruning, planting, pretending like the silence is a choice. The porch banister had been loose for over 2 months. Every time I walked past it with a laundry basket, it wobbled under my hand. I mentioned it to Russell twice. He said I'll get to it this weekend, but the weekends came and went. Like always. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. Just tired of waiting. Then one morning, tucked between grocery coupons and realtor ads, I found a flyer in the mailbox. Reliable handyman services, no job too small. A name handwritten across the bottom, Elias. Local. Licensed. Available weekdays. I didn't think much about it. But that creaky banister wobbled again under my fingers, and something in me snapped. I called. I thought he'd just fix the banister. I didn't expect him to notice me in a way my husband hadn't in years. It was a Thursday morning, the kind where the sky can't decide whether it wants to rain or clear up. I'd almost forgotten I called anyone, but when I opened the door, there he was, toolbox in one hand, the other adjusting the brim of his cap. "Morning, ma'am." "Elias Mera. You called about the banister." His voice was warm, with a hint of something, maybe an accent, maybe just kindness. I pulled my sweater tighter. "Yes, that's right. Come on around this way." He followed me to the porch, stepping lightly like he was careful not to disturb the silence. Up close, he looked to be mid-30s. Olive skin. Thick dark hair just starting to curl near the edges. Not conventionally handsome, but calm. Present. The kind of man who wasn't in a rush to be anywhere else. "This won't take long," he said, kneeling to examine the wood. "The structure's still good, just needs some reinforcement." I nodded, unsure whether to linger or leave him to it. From the kitchen, I watched through the window. There was something about the way he worked, focused, unrushed, like the world slowed down around him. About 40 minutes later, he knocked on the door. "All done," he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Should be solid now." I stepped out and pressed against the railing. It didn't budge. "Thank you," I said, smiling. "Seriously?" He nodded, lips curling into a half smile. "Let me know if anything else comes up." I almost said it already has, but I didn't. Just watched as he walked down the steps and disappeared toward his truck. Back inside, the house felt quieter than usual, and I realized, for the first time in a long time, I'd felt seen. I told myself it was just a garage door, just a small fix. But if I'm being honest, I think I wanted to see him again. A week passed. The porch railing held steady, but now, the garage door had started to stick. It groaned when I opened it, jerked when I tried to close it. Nothing serious, nothing urgent, but enough. Elias's number was still pinned on the fridge. I stared at it longer than I should have, and then I called. He came by the next morning. Same quiet manner, same calm presence, same baseball cap, though I noticed now it was a little faded around the edges. This time, I offered him a glass of iced tea. "Thank you," he said, pausing under the shade beside the garage. The sun was already warming up the concrete. "You're good at this," I said, motioning to his tools. "It's what I do," he replied. His voice was low, steady, with a trace of something older than his years. We didn't say much, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was companionable. I asked about his background. He shared that he used to be an engineer in Iran, moved to the States for school, fell in love with building things with his hands. After his wife passed, he stayed. "I didn't want to start over again," he said, eyes not quite meeting mine. I nodded, not because I understood fully, but because I knew what it meant to stay in a place even when parts of you wanted to leave. When he finished the garage door, it moved smoother than it had in years. "You always show up," I said quietly. He looked at me just for a second too long. "So do you," he replied. I didn't know what to say to that. So I smiled, said thank you again, watched him walk away. But this time, something followed him back to his truck. A part of me I thought I'd tucked away a long time ago. It was supposed to be the last time. Just a few warped boards on the back deck, nothing more. But that day, something shifted, and not just the wood under our feet. The steps of our back deck had started to sag. Russell said he'd call someone. He didn't. So I did. When Elias pulled into the driveway, I was kneeling by the flower beds, hands, dirty knees, damp. "You're going to wear me out, Maggie," he joked as he stepped out, toolbox in hand. "Just keeping you employed," I smiled, brushing soil from my palms. The job took longer than expected. The boards were worse than I thought. Late afternoon melted into golden light, and I brought him a sandwich, lemonade, and a chair. We sat side by side on the deck steps. He told me about his mother's garden back home in Ethiopia, how the scent of jasmine always reminded him of her laughter. I told him about the kids, the quiet moments after they moved out, the way Russell stopped sitting outside years ago. He didn't interrupt, just listened, like he always did. Then he said it, quiet, thoughtful. "You have a beautiful home, Maggie. But sometimes it doesn't look like you believe that." I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the grass. A breeze picked up. And still, we didn't move. He stood and returned to work. I watched. But the silence that hung between us didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, like something unspoken had finally been said. If you've ever felt something you couldn't quite say out loud, just leave a dot in the comments, because sometimes a single dot says more than 1,000 words. It wasn't the rain. It wasn't the broken faucet. It was the way he looked at me like I was still someone worth noticing. The upstairs bathroom had started leaking. Not gushing, just an occasional drip from the old faucet. Enough to annoy me, but not enough to rush. Russell was out of town again. The kids were gone. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I stood in front of the mirror that morning, brushing my hair, watching the water drip in the sink. Drip, drip, drip. And then I called. Elias arrived by mid-morning. I greeted him with a nervous smile. "This one's quick," I said, leading him upstairs. He nodded, toolbox in hand. The bathroom was small, closer than I remembered. His shoulder brushed mine as he knelt to work. I stepped back, but not far. The sound of his wrench filled the room. The faint scent of sawdust and soap clung to him. Familiar now. "Can you hand me that towel?" he asked. I reached across. Our fingers touched just a second, but it was different. He looked up. Our eyes locked. We didn't speak. We didn't move. Until he did. It was soft, hesitant, almost like a question. His lips barely brushed mine. I could have stepped away. I didn't. I let it happen. For a second, I forgot everything else. The house, the years, the guilt, the rules. When we pulled apart, neither of us said a word. Just breathing. Heavy. Quiet. Real. He stood. "I'm sorry," he said, voice raw. I shook my head. "No, I'm not." And that scared me more than the kiss. I walked him to the door. The rain had started slow at first, then harder. He turned at the porch water dripping from his cap. "Take care, Maggie." "You too," I whispered. He left. The engine faded down the street. I stood there, heart pounding the rain, soaking into the wood beneath my feet. And I knew. Something had shifted. Something we couldn't take back. I found her standing in the kitchen, holding it. The notebook. Elias must have left it behind on the counter. I hadn't noticed. But she had. My daughter was 17, old enough to read between the lines, too young to understand the weight behind them. She didn't say anything at first, just flipped through the pages quiet. I stood there frozen, waiting. Then she asked without looking up, "Who is this about?" I could have lied. Said it was fiction, a project, a poem. But I didn't. I walked over, gently closed the notebook in her hands. "Someone who used to come by," I said, "to fix things." She looked up at me, eyes searching. "What kind of things?" she asked. I took a breath. Little things, like doors, fences. I paused, and sometimes, people. There was a silence between us, not cold, just uncertain. She didn't push, didn't ask who he was, or why he was writing about me. But I saw it in her eyes, the question she didn't ask, so I answered it anyway. He helped me remember that I'm still alive. She nodded, slowly, didn't say a word, just left the notebook on the table and walked upstairs. And I stood there, holding more guilt than I knew what to do with, and more clarity than I expected to have. Days turned into weeks. Russell came back. The kids came and went. The banister held. So did the garage door. Life, it seemed, had repaired itself. But something in me had not. I went back to routines, laundry lesson plans, watering flowers, but the silence now felt different. Heavier, like it had weight. I didn't call Elias again. I didn't need to. But not needing didn't mean not thinking. Sometimes I'd catch myself glancing at the porch, half expecting a truck to pull in. It never did. One day, I walked past the fridge and saw his number still pinned there. I didn't remove it. I just looked at it and kept walking. Months passed. Then nearly a year later, I saw him. I was at the grocery store, checking avocados. I looked up, and there he was across the produce aisle. He looked the same. Almost. A little older. Maybe I did too. He didn't smile. Not right away. Just looked at me. I looked back. For a second, the world slowed. The beeping, registers, the chatter, the music overhead, all faded. Then he gave the smallest nod. Not an invitation, not an apology, just recognition. And I returned it. He turned, walked away. No wave, no words, no need. Some people leave quietly. Some stories don't end in heartbreak or reunion. They just live inside you, like a soft light behind your ribs, or a door gently closed, but never fully locked. Some lines don't need to be crossed to change you. Sometimes, just standing near the edge is enough. I didn't leave my marriage. I didn't burn my life down. But something in me was rewritten that day, in the rain, in the silence, in that one moment that was both wrong and deeply painfully real. This story isn't about cheating. It's about the loneliness that creeps in between I love you and I'll be home late. It's about the small ways we disappear from each other and the rare moments someone sees us, truly sees us, before we even remember we're still here. Elias didn't stay, but he didn't need to, because sometimes we meet people not to hold on to them, but to wake up the parts of ourselves we almost let die. If you're living beside someone truly beside them, but haven't looked at them in a long time, maybe it's time you did. Not just to check if they're okay, but to ask yourself, do I still see who they are becoming? Or am I only seeing who they used to be? And if you feel invisible in your own home, fading slowly into someone else's busy schedule, step out of the silence. Say the thing you haven't said. Ask the question you're afraid to know the answer to. Because emotional distance doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it just happens with every cup of coffee poured in silence. If you've ever stood at the edge of a moment you didn't plan for, a moment that didn't destroy your life but rewrote something inside you, you're not alone. Leave just a single dot in the comments if you've ever felt something you couldn't explain. That dot means I've been there too. And if this story stirred something in you, something quiet, something old, share it with someone who might need to remember they're still alive too. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, true, tender, and human. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we almost never tell.